Good morning, world. Here I am with bit number 28 of 30 in my 30 Bits of Bravery Facebook Live challenge that I started way back, maybe in June, it may have been May. My goal was to share 30 instances, 30 stories from my life when I did something that required a little bit of bravery on my part, a little bit of courage to achieve something that kind of moved me beyond who I thought I was. Today's story is a direct result of, I think it was yesterday's story, where I talked about reading a Christmas poem. Oh, and hopefully that lawnmower outside isn't too loud. Yesterday, or a couple of days ago, I shared the story of Christmas time when my mother in law asked me to read a poem to my husband's grandmother. The result of that embarrassing, humiliating, self-devastating experience was that I joined Toastmasters and developed my public speaking skills. Fast forward a year and a half or so, and I noticed on the job board at work there was a posting for the position of loaned executive for the United Way's annual campaign. And I looked at that and I thought, I wonder if that's something I could do. But I got caught up in the words loaned executive. I wasn't an executive. I worked in the factory. I worked on night shift. I was very overweight and I wore sweatpants and a t-shirt to work every day. I certainly didn't look like an executive. Amazingly enough, our company facilitator for the campaign that year was someone that I knew. And as he and I were having a conversation one day, he suggested to me that I actually apply. And he said, you know someone on the deciding team, so, I'll put in a good word for you. And I'm thinking that would be kind of cool, and it would definitely move me out of my comfort zone. I applied for the position and I got it. So here I am now going to be a loaned executive from factory worker. Here are some things that I learned about the whole experience. The expectation that I had for the appearance, the intelligence, and the caliber of people that would serve in this role was much greater than the reality. And I don't mean to put down any of my fellow loaned executives. The loaned executive program, let me tell you about that. It's basically where larger companies within the community will send one or two people to work for the United Way on their annual campaign. The employer pays that worker's salary. So whatever they were currently making, they're still making for the duration of this campaign, which was around 3.5 months. So it's a great way for these businesses to give back to the community to support the fundraising efforts of the United Way. So that's what my role was. I was working at United Way, but I was still being paid by my employer. So before the orientation with United Way, because I wore sweatpants and t-shirts to work every day, I went out and I purchased some new clothes. I didn't have a large budget, so I went to some of the discount shops, but I purchased things that I thought came close to meeting the wardrobe requirements for an executive. I bought a couple of suits, I bought some skirts and some dresses. Showed up the first day and I had a skirt on, and other women were wearing slacks. There were some people that were wearing jeans. There was one woman, she was the sweetest woman, and she looked so new age hippie-ish in just this bright flowery summer dress. She became very good friends with me. And her name was Beth. She was adorable. I loved her. But as I walked in there, I felt like, oh, maybe I went a little overboard on the clothes because I wasn't feeling like I was fitting in. All I wanted to do was fit in. I wanted to blend into this group of, I didn't know how many people there would be. And I think we ended up with around 20 people. So in the first meeting, we're in this large conference room, all of us loaned executives, we don't know each other. We're sitting around a table. There's United Way staff standing around and they're watching us all. And we were told to introduce ourselves. So there was one person, one or two people to my right, and that's where they started. The first person said his name. I could barely hear it, and I was sitting very close. The second person said his name. And then it was my turn. So I stood up. My Toastmasters training came into play. I stood up, said my full name and where I worked. And then I sat back down. And then they went around the table. No one else stood up. There were people I couldn't see because they were along that same line of the table as I was. Couldn't see them, couldn't hear their names. And I thought, ooh, I stood up. Guess that wasn't a good thing. No one followed my trend. And I was feeling more and more diminished and different and separated from them. But, you got to keep moving forward. I had this commitment for those 3.5 months. So we kept progressing through our training. And there was one part, because part of the responsibility of a loan executive is to lead presentations in front of groups of company workers to invite them to contribute to the campaign. So I wasn't worried about that part because of my Toastmasters training. After the training was over, the United Way staff, who had been watching us all closely as we were going through, they finally told us which categories of business, which group of businesses we were working with. We had some people that working with the banks and the insurance companies, others within the school systems, others with nonprofits, others with manufacturing, others with like law enforcement agencies. So there were these broad categories that we would all be assigned to work with. And then within those categories, most of the teams were made up of 2 or 3 loaned executives working together. Well, I was assigned to the banking and the insurance companies. And the 2 people that were on my team were both attorneys. Yikes, they were both very well dressed. They both had this presence about them that was very commanding, very assertive, very respectful. They were both wonderful people. I didn't feel like I belonged, but this is where I was told to go. We worked and we worked and we worked. At the end of the program, and yes, I did definitely grow a lot over the course of these 3 months. I had to make phone calls. I hate making phone calls, but I knew that was one of the things that I would have the opportunity to develop those skills. So so we went through the program, and at the very end, we had a banquet, and we had a chance to talk about our experience and recognize some of the people that had made a difference for our experience. And it was during that banquet time that I found out that the reason, and this wasn't a public thing, it was a little aside conversation afterwards. I asked one of the United Way staff members, I said, how the heck did this factory worker get assigned to banking and insurance? I don't understand that, because I would have expected to work with more of the blue collar jobs. And he told me that I had made an impression on all of them that very first day in orientation when I stood up and said my name. I had made an impression on them by the clothing that I was wearing, and that I made an impression on them when I was giving my short presentations to develop that skill, which I already had pretty much. I just had to kind of tailor it to what the United Way needed. And he said, these are the skills and these are the things that we look at to make sure that when you're going into that environment, that you feel and you look like you belong. And I thought, And it was a valid point, because my friend in the flowery dress, would she have felt as comfortable if she walked into an insurance company where people were business professional? Maybe not. She might have felt a little awkward, and that might have thrown off the way that she could present to the group. So sometimes when we don't feel like we fit in, when we feel like an opportunity is above us, factory worker, as an executive, we just have to believe in ourselves a little bit more. Trust that we will be used, and we will work with the best tools that we have available, and we will put our best efforts forward. So it was a scary experience. Pretty much every day I was going in there, and my stomach was in knots. I was very anxious and upset, or not upset, but uptight and feeling that anxiety about it. One thing, I parallel parked in Portland, Maine, which I don't parallel park, but I had to, and I did it. So that was one of the major accomplishments. So there were a lot of bits of bravery in my loaned executive experience. And it's one that I'm so glad that I took advantage of it, because so many times we say, oh, that would be kind of cool, but I'm not qualified. I'm not an executive, therefore I can't apply. So I encourage you to apply, give things your best shot. So that was 28 of 30 bits of bravery. Have an amazing day, and I will see you soon.